Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Golden Disc Yellow Tea session. We've had two previous sessions on yellow tea, veiled and standalone. Today, you're going to get a very different experience with Golden Disc. And we planned it this way when we set out to, or when we were thinking about how are we going to talk about yellow tea. The other thing is last week, the question arose, how does tea play a role in gift giving or tribute? That type of a question. And we're gonna, before this session is over, you're gonna have a lot more knowledge about that. You're gonna have tremendous knowledge about a unique, incredible tea, and you're gonna get some science today. Now, that automatically means words that are 8 letters or more. So strap on your lexicon seatbelt and let's get started. And let's start out with the science. We've talked about this so-called sealing, smothering, brazing. I mean, they use every translation term in the book to describe Montclair. But you know what it is. After the tea has been fried or heated, not fried or heated, fried actually is the right word because the Japanese don't make yellow tea. What was in my mind there for a second was fried or steamed. It's never steamed, it's always fried in this particular modality. So after it's fried, then there's a series of actually causing the tea to further oxidize and actually start to turn yellow, start to mellow out. And that's in a series of, depending on the type of yellow tea, anywhere from 3 or 4 days in length of time to accomplish that, down to about 12 or 13 hours. So we've gone through that process. It's an iterative process. You do it once, you take it apart, you mix everything, you do it again. Sometimes you fry in between, sometimes you bake in between. The point is, you're trying to change the composition of the tea leaf so that you get a different end result. Okay, so let's talk about one specific aspect of this because this is really, really important. And I have tried to stay away from the science, too deep in the science, because it's easy to get lost in the weeds in the science. But today's the day. We are going to get lost in the weeds a little bit. And then I'm going to go back to history a little bit. So and I'm really specifically talking about the sealing process or the smothering process. So how is it that tea leaves change and continue to oxidize? So I told you that green tea is unoxidized, white tea is lightly oxidized, and yellow tea is more heavily oxidized, anywhere up to between 20 and 30%. So we know that, but now let's think about the science about that. So if you are frying at a lower temperature, then you don't completely get rid of the chemical agent in the leaves, which causes oxidation. And that's polyphenol oxidase. That's the name of the chemical element within the leaf. And it's endogenous. Another long word. That means it's actually contained in the leaf. And so when you apply heat, the leaf releases that and it prevents oxidation. If you do not apply that heat and you process the leaf, you're going to get some oxidation. That's an endogenous polyphenol oxidase. All right. There's another way to oxidize. So we talked about endogenous. How about exogenous? How about from the outside? So yellow tea utilizes a methodology to create enzyme which actually causes the tea to oxidize lightly. Where does this come from? What, do we have salt and pepper shakers of this stuff and we just sprinkle it on the tea and tea leaves and boink, oh, we have oxidation? The answer would be it actually is created by microbes. Uh-oh, by microbes. That sounds like maybe there's some fermentation going on here. Oh, is this really different than raw black or fully fermented black? Just at a lesser level? So the answer to that is also no. It is different because, first off, not every yellow tea actually has much fermentation or any fermentation going on in it with it at all. Many do, and it's because they're held in a humid environment. The elements in the air and the elements on the tea leaves themselves cause a slight fermentation. And as that fermentation occurs, a compound, a microorganism, a microbe arises. It doesn't arise, it's there. It's Aspergillus niger. You've heard about this compound many, many times, and you've heard about it in relationship to raw black as well as fully fermented tea. So a trace amount of that occurs when you're doing wet smothering, wet sealing. So not every yellow tea, although today's does the wet sealing. And so, and what it is after the tea has been fried, the moisture content is about 50–60%. And instead of doing anything to dry the leaves, bake it could be an example, sun dry it could be an example. Sometimes they rush from after they've reduced it to 50–60% and then wrap it, put it in a humid room, temperature controlled for X number of hours. And the hours vary by type of yellow tea. The length varies by the skill of the farmer and what the culture in that particular area is. That's the farming culture in handling the tea leaves. So these are all variables that occur. And so the sealing process, Aspergillus niger produces as a byproduct of it's going through the fermentation process, what is called outside polyphenol oxidation. And that's what causes the oxidation in the yellow tea. And this process is significantly different than the raw black or the fully fermented. Because you remember in the fully fermented, what are they doing? They're adding water all through a 45 to 60 day period. You know, you get it heated up, it's like a composting process. Boink, it gets to that temperature. Okay, come to a stop. You know, fluff it up, take the bottom and put it on top, and then do it again. 45 to 60 days. This is not what they're doing with yellow tea. It produces a little bit of this Aspergillus niger, which is in the environment. There is no starter. See, with the fully fermented, there's a starter, right? There's no starter. This is in the environment. This is a natural occurrence of leaving it wet and then wrapping it up and maintaining a certain temperature and humidity. So that's the real science around oxidation, especially higher levels of oxidation of the yellow tea. And that's different, by the way, than the oxidation of the white tea. The white tea is oxidized lightly. Why is that? That's because the endogenous polyphenol oxidase is never fully denatured. It isn't ever exposed to heat at that temperature. Hey, what temperature did I say? Over 150 degrees. Instead, it's sun-dried. And so, yes, it slows down the oxidation and it doesn't allow for a huge amount of it, but it still happens. And the resulting chemical composition is different. So in yellow tea, you have micromolecules being broken down into sugars and other components that make it mellow, that mellow it out. This is what that whole process is about. All right, enough of the science. I thought I'd go there today since this particular yellow tea has experienced that. And I haven't talked about that before. It's really important to understand this from a scientific viewpoint. Are you all going to go out there and start talking about all these elements? No, but you'll have an understanding and this will reinforce your positions as the 1%ers because you know this stuff. And if somebody comes in and says, oh, wow, we're going to braise the LT, and you're going to look at them and, oh, okay. And for the oxidation part, what are you doing for that? And they're going to come to a standstill because they don't know what you're talking about. This is what you're asking about. Let's talk about history. You know, I would love to believe things that are said on the internet. I really have faith in my fellow human, and I understand when something gets said once, then it's picked up and then repeated millions of times. That's the beauty of the internet. Again, that's also the horror of the internet. And yet again, that's the uncertainty of the internet. So even looking on the Chinese side of the internet, one of the things which is totally confusing from my perspective, and will be from yours as well, because we've talked about the history of green tea developing into the histories of all the other modalities of teas. Well, you can imagine my shock and surprise this week as I was doing research for today's discussion, when I came across there's actually a poem written in the Tang Dynasty, which seems to be referring to yellow tea. And this is a poem I hadn't seen before, but it's a real thing. You know, I checked that also just to make sure it wasn't a Tang Dynasty AI poem. No, it's a real poem. It's got historical provenance, so there's no problem with that. There really was an author. And I can only conclude the following. We know that all plants go through mutations. That's the laws of nature. Everything goes over time through mutations. And we've seen it with tea plants because we know we've seen tea plants with purple leaves, with yellow leaves. Those plants, that's nature playing with those plants. I'm not talking about the hybrids that are created by man. We know that nature has created different colors of tea leaves. Typically, we think green because that's the majority. I mean, it's the majority in a huge number, by a huge amount. Nonetheless, we've seen tea plants that are naturally yellow. So it does exist. So that may be what's reflected when people refer to in the Tang Dynasty quotes yellow tea. because I really am hard pressed to currently believe that the yellow tea process, which is really rather complicated, existed at that time. I don't want to say it didn't, because obviously I didn't live at that time. Current historical resources lead me to still doubt that there really was yellow tea methodology. My belief is yellow tea methodology actually came into existence sometime in the late 1700s, early 1800s. That's what my belief is. But sadly, there's no absolute document that I can point to. There's so many things I can point to for other modalities. Yellow tea, there's not enough research has been done. There's much more that's in process being done. But I want to point out to you, you may see reference to yellow tea in the Tang Dynasty. It probably is really reference to yellow tea leaves, would be my belief, not the actual yellow tea methodology. All right, so that's so much for history. Let's talk about the yellow tea today versus the yellow tea in the last 2 weeks. First off, provenance, Hunan Province. Where in Hunan Province? Dungting Lake. So Dungting Lake, Junshan Island, is a small island in this lake, is where this tea cake was made. How many of these cakes were made? 1,000. Why were they made? Did somebody just wake up one morning in the Junshan area and say, gosh, I haven't seen yellow cakes here in a long time, and then just cook up a batch? That's not quite what happened. They had several in 2013 and 2014, several expositions related to yellow tea, worldwide expositions. And so they were trying to promote yellow tea at that time. And as a commemorative, they made these special yellow tea kits. 1,000 of them made. We snagged, and no need to go into details about this part of the story. We'll just relate facts. We snagged 200 of them. And we have sold about 100 of these things. These cakes are incredible. And again, you'll see today when we go through the tasting part. You can't go into any store and buy these. These are what they call gift teas, commemorative teas. Remember last week I said I was going to talk about this? All right. So think about your favorite grandma's birthday. And grandma has everything, doesn't she? I mean, there's nothing she lacks. She's lived life. She's been successful. She's acquired all the things she thinks she wants. What do you do for a grandma like this? How about a yellow tea cake, which she hasn't acquired, which she hasn't even seen most likely, and which for grandma's taste would be pretty darn good. So people, when they are doing business deals, sometimes to seal the deal will give a gift. The deal is actually sealed with a handshake, isn't it? We know this. In China, it's a relationship. No contract really matters if you don't have a handshake. It really doesn't. You can go in court of law. Well, this says this says that. But really, how are deals consummated? Two people or a small set of people discuss, plan, and handshake. That's it. And then after the fact, they memorialize. That's what happens. So between memorialization and after the handshake, let me present you something that represents our faith in this enterprise moving forward, or something that honors you as a person, or honors your business, or as an official. I need a gift. not I need a gift. I need something to be consummated. Here's a gift. This is how culture, tea culture, is built around gifts and gift giving. So let's back up a minute. Does this have a long history in China? Absolutely, because the emperor year after year got gifts, tea gifts, and it was always the best stuff that was sent, trying to impress the emperor. This was kind of Confucian in nature, because if you think about it, among tea aficionados, what you did is you found, if you were trying to impress somebody or get a favor done, you found the best tea you could and you gave it as a gift. And by the way, if you also found the best water you could and gave that as a accompanying gift, that was even, particularly in the Tang and Sung dynasty, even more sought after. The water's dropped off the map. Even though the importance of water is every bit as important today as it was back then. It's just that more people have access to good waters than during the Tang and the Sung dynasty. So gift giving has a long history. It has a history of trying to advance your interests, and in exchange, you're giving something of uniqueness, of value that is unavailable in the marketplace in order to advance the uniqueness. That's the tea you're all having today, the golden disc. And that's the reason we put this at this place, because not only is the process of doing this differently, it's more wet. That is when they seal or smother the yellow, create the yellow. Let's just use create the yellow. I hate all these other terms. That's why I can never stand on one of them. They create the yellow. They go through the process of create the yellow. They do it without drying before it starts. And then that creates the conditions to produce from the Aspergillus niger, from that microbe, the elements which would be called outside polyphenol oxidase, the element to cause oxidation. And you get a different chemical constituent. What chemical constituent is different? I mean, after all, oxidation is oxidation, isn't it? And the answer is no. We already heard you have this endogenous, and then you have this outside oxidation. And yes, oxidation, and I alluded to this last week. Now I got to explain a little bit more. Theaflavins. I said yellow theaflavins. Chinese scientists and other scientists are doing a lot of work on this stuff. And one of the things I saw this week was actually about two things. And we've heard about this from Japanese scientists already. The clearing of toxins from the liver. And we heard about this from Japanese scientists as early as 2013. And now we're getting more evidence of that. So that's one thing. The other, for the gut microbiome, it appears to have a beneficial effect, the yellow theaflavins. So more information to come, more study is required for this in order to give you a body of knowledge which says, oh yes, for sure, if you drink 3 cups of this a day, your liver's going to live forever. You may not, but your liver will. All right. That was a joke, by the way. I want to hear God said whatever I just said. I've come to the conclusion of the science and history part. Now comes the really fun part, and that's the tasting part. And during this tasting, for those of you who are so accustomed to the way we do tasting, Remember, today you have to pay a little bit of attention because we're gonna change it up. All right, so a 10-second intermission. I'll go find the tea master. Tea master is deep in her studies somewhere. Let me see if I can find her. Oh, and here comes, wow, the beautiful, very colorful tea master Bijou.
Hey, good morning. 早上好. Yeah, we do yellow tea, It's from Hunan. So also, this is from the tea cake. So, yeah, 这样一本哈. This is tea.
Is that real gold?
Yeah, from tea cake. Real gold, yeah. Yeah, so we do tea today from this cake. Okay, so I give you a little bit another decoration. So,
Wow, we're gonna use 1 cake per cup?
yeah, I put in the, yeah. And also, so 我给大家呢，就是
Yeah, so she's already broken off and you already got a broken up set of pieces. And when you have this cake, that's what you would do. You break a portion of it, usually about 1/4 of it, and put it in a separate container, put the original 3/4 back, keep it protected so you don't keep opening and closing that, but you open and close the 1/4, break off what you're supposed to break off per cup. So that's what you all have in bag number 3. Remember, Bijou is going to demonstrate first, and this is important because this isn't the normal way that you do most of the teas. So let's see what's different. Oh, it looks like she's using water. That's at least the same. Keeping the cups thoroughly clean. That's the same. Oh my gosh, she has tea rhythm this morning. I can already tell. That's the same.
Yeah, this is this from Junsan.
Yes,
Yeah.
as she's reminding everybody, this is from Junshan, the same Junshan that creates Junshan needle. And if at the end we have a little bit more time, I'll talk a little bit more about Junshan, but let's wait until we get to the end. I want to make sure that we have time to thoroughly enjoy, understand, and discuss this particular tea, because this is really special tea. The usual rhythm.
这个洗一下，
Okay, and
得洗一下。
so we're gonna go through a rinse here, and that's what's different. She puts it in the cup. And you notice we didn't rinse any of the other teas. This isn't a rinse in the same way that fully fermented is rinsed. It's the process is the same. The reason is different. The reason, oh, that was fast. That was like 5 seconds. Wow, that was really fast. The reason for this is to enhance the flavor. We found that any other way that you do that, you're not going to get quite as good a flavor. Then we go back. So the rinse was with 200-degree water. All right, let's make sure we get this distinction. You have 200-degree water, a 5-second rinse. That's what you saw her do. And then she actually brews, do that, something. Yeah. Then she uses 175 degree to actually steep the tea. So you're going to need to have 2 temperatures of water this morning. And that's what's different than normal. So it's a little harder to brew. It's not so much it's harder. There's an additional step to brewing it, but it's well worth it at the end when you taste it. So and set for 3 minutes. Now, I want to talk quickly about Junshan. That area, since about 2010, actually even before that, has really been promoting yellow tea. And this is a cooperation between the farmers, between the tourist people who operate tours to Junshan Island, and the government itself in terms of promoting yellow tea. And they actually are trying to promote yellow tea all over China. And particularly as they start to home in on the health benefits, you're going to see more and more of this. Their production levels of yellow tea have gone through the roof. They, this next year, are projecting that they're going to create 100,000 tons of yellow tea. That's a lot of yellow tea. And so most of the Chinese population, 99.9%, has heard of yellow tea. Probably only half or less has actually drunk yellow tea, but everybody's heard of yellow tea because within the Chinese government, it's very famous and it's been promoted. You heard the story about them serving Junshan needle when they were admitted to the United Nations in 1971 to all the delegates at the United Nations. So this is for a long time been famous in China. It's just, it hasn't been produced a lot. And until recently, most people in China, or quite a few people in China, really haven't had the chance. And actually, let me back up. Since the 2000s, there's annually more and more being produced of the yellow tea. So more people do have access to the yellow tea. So that gives you a little bit of background. They're pouring a tremendous amount of money. The government, the local enterprises, and the farmers are pouring a tremendous amount of money into all aspects of the yellow tea. And I saw an estimate that there are 1 million jobs created by yellow tea in Hunan. And Hunan has 6 counties that actually produce yellow tea. Most of them are not very well known. Junshan, of course, is internationally. All right, so that gives you a little bit of background. Timer has gone off. Tea Master rhythmically is separating the tea leaves from the tea water. And let's see what we have here. Well, we have a pleasant yellow color, that's for sure. And we're going to enter the quality arena. And for those of you who are new, remember the quality arena is ascertaining where in the mouth there's astringency. And that's the polyphenols interacting with your taste buds. What is the aftertaste? And what are the energetics? And remembering, we're all going to feel something a little different because we're all genomically different. All right, I'm going to enter the quality arena. You notice I take my time. We're not in a rush to do this. Okay, I'm feeling polyphenol activity on my tongue. Oh, and actually in my mouth. I do have an aftertaste for this. I don't have energetics yet. I'm going to take a second sip and I'm going to focus on reinforcing that what I detected the first time around is really what I'm still detecting. And I'm going to start to think about the sensory effects. What's the aroma? What's the taste? And remember, I have my notebook out. You just don't see it. But I do have my notebook out, and we're taking notes every week so that you know and can compare week to week. Wow. Okay. It's your turn. So the tea master is going to go ahead and brew along with you. I've already taken my notes, so I'm waiting for you to try and take your notes. And remember, as we go through this process, the most important thing is to maintain a nice rhythm. It's 3 minute steeping time, so you can set your timers. Make sure your cups are all clean and warmed up and just ready. Yes, the tea master always has her tableau in good order. Remember, you draw 200-degree water first. Because we're going to go through a rinse.
Jonathan asked, would you ever give anyone less than a whole cake if the tea comes in a cake?
So this is a really great question. And I thank you for asking this, Jonathan, because in China, so I can definitely answer this from a Chinese point of view. From a Chinese point of view, giving less than a whole cake seems inappropriate. And so the answer from the Chinese perspective is no, you would never break up a cake. I understand why, from a Western perspective, it may seem extravagant, but that's just culturally, when you give a gift, it's like, okay, I know the exact comparison. You get a fancy set of Legos, and you think to yourself, God, that costs a couple $100. You know what? I'm gonna divide it up, give parts of it to different kids. You just never do that. And so from a Chinese perspective, and by the way, you saw the rinse, the 5-second rinse, 200-degree water. Now she already had the 170 to 175-degree water prepared. The cake is seen as a whole gift. And so anything which diminishes a whole gift, the concept of a whole gift, they just wouldn't do in China. All right, you put the 175-degree water in, you set the timer for 3 minutes. Prior to doing all that, you did a rinse. And particularly for a gift cake, I'm trying to think in China, would you take a whole fully fermented cake and break it up and give a part to, say, relatives or close friends? Yeah, I've seen that done before. But for example, if the cake were a commemorative cake of some sort, I've just never seen that done. I've never gotten the sense that that would be done in China. You can do anything you want here, obviously. It's just if you're dealing with a Chinese person and you just gave them a quarter or a half of a cake, if they were in their Chinese culture head, they would be offended. If they're in their Western head, oh, this is really nice. It's not the way we would do it. And you would avoid offending the person. But so think carefully about that, because a Westerner probably wouldn't be able to know the difference because we might not start at that point. But a Chinese person would definitely know the difference and feel offended that they didn't get the whole cake. And these are for the gift cakes. So where do I want to go from here? Yes. Let's go back to the historical thing for one more minute, because you see a lot of reference to yellow tea starting in the Ming Dynasty. Again, I saw a number of places where that was referenced, and I see no supporting evidence for that. And again, I think there's confusion between the color yellow and the modality yellow. I think that that's where the confusion is. And it's certainly, we've seen that before with white tea in the Sung Dynasty, with that particular emperor who wrote about the tea, and the name of the tea has the word white in it, but that actually is a color white rather than a modality white. So it's really important when one is studying Chinese history, not to accept things at face value, but to make sure you look for other references which confirm. All right, timer's gone off. Separate the tea leaves from the tea water.
Rob shares, I steeped with 170-degree water because I was not fully present. I am now fully present.
Oh my goodness. So that goes under the category of energetics. Good comment, Rob. Love it. Mhm. So while you're tasting this, the other thing I would note about this particular tea is we've never actually seen this one process. And because it's done only occasionally, there's probably some other steps, some other subtleties, so to speak, that affect how the outcome of this tea. And just be aware of that, because the last 2 weeks we've seen and we know, and we're able to give you very complete details. Anytime we're in the Junshan area, it always seems mysterious, and it always seems a part of the process is not, it's a little opaque, particularly in something like this. With the Junshan process, Junshan needle, we know the process and we've seen parts of it, but there's some opaqueness around the paper that the tea is stored in. And I would assume that this was probably also stored in paper and probably with the same opaqueness. Yes.
Jennifer shares, the wet leaves remind me of oolong cliff tea leaves. There's a luscious sweetness to them.
Ah, I love this comment. So Jennifer said, this reminds her of oolong leaves, the wet leaves, and there's a luscious sweetness about it. And there absolutely is a luscious sweetness about this. And, you know, if you're going to make a gift tea, it better have a luscious sweetness. And indeed it does, yes.
Kay shares, the wet leaves have a marvelous fruity aroma, dried and very ripe at the same time.
Oh, I love this comment. Thank you, Kay. Dried leaves have a fruity, fresh aroma. Dried, even though it's
Very ripe, like dried and very ripe
Ah.
fruit at the same time.
very ripe fruit. Two things going on at the same time, dried and ripe fruit. And I love that comment because it captures how unique this flavor profile is. If somebody gave this to you and you were distracted and you weren't in your tea rhythm space, you would be like going 100 miles an hour in a 15-mile-an-hour zone. So you wouldn't see anything. And this is really the beauty of today, going through this with this type of tea in this way. Yes.
Rob shares, the smell of the tea water has a subtle hint of raw black with notes of honey and cider.
Oh, you know, I love this comment because as soon as he said it, I knew he was right. Rob indicated, and I've never described this way to anybody, and yet this is such a good description, particularly of the raw blacks that we have that are over 10 or 15 years old. So there's a hint of raw black layered with honey and sweetness. Thank you, Rob. That's great.
Jen E says the taste is similar to coruscation.
Oh, another right on the money. Coruscation, as we know, is a very old raw black, and it does have that. It really does reach back, and that's a very, very good observation because, again, I hadn't thought of actually linking the two together, but it's exactly the right thing to do. I get it. Nice job, Jen.
Jen, oh, and she adds kudos to Rob on his description of the tea, that similarity to raw black.
Mm. Good. You all are circling around this in a great way. And it's funny, even though I don't remember any Chinese person describing it as having that aged raw black, a similarity to aged raw black, I'm sure if I did it, it would get their attention. The other thing about this, this is aged as well. And so when it first came, that sweetness was even more pronounced. Yes.
Jennifer says the tea liquor is light and easy to drink.
Yes. And this was my point about 100 miles an hour in a 15-mile-an-hour zone. It is light and easy to drink. I have seen people order this and sit here and finish it in under a minute. And it's like, oh my gosh, I wonder what they thought they just drank. And so it's that sense of there's nothing offensive. Everything is smooth, it's mellow. It just tastes good.
Jonathan asked, does yellow tea age or last longer stored better than green tea?
Great question, Jonathan. So the question is, if you take green tea in one hand and yellow tea in the other hand, and you age them both, will they age the same way? Does one age better than the other? And there's an absolute answer to that, which is the yellow tea, without question, is so much easier to age. I am going to say something which only the 1%ers, that I can only really say to you, because most of the time in the tea world, you're not going to hear this statement. The fact that you don't hear it doesn't mean it's not true. So green tea, if carefully handled, can actually be stored for a much longer time than people expect. The problem or the issue with green tea is there's a period. And for each tea, it's different. Maybe in year 4, maybe in year 5, where it's undrinkable. And then all of a sudden, in year 6, it's drinkable again. So it's not that you can't store green tea. We never recommend that because it has its difficult era of a couple of years somewhere there. And usually people aren't patient. Yellow tea has no difficult era. It just gets better and better, mellower and mellower. Yes.
Jennifer observes, my sense is that this tea this week is not as astringent as last week's tea. Am I right?
Yes. So Jennifer asked, and she compares. She looked at her notes for last week and the previous week and saw that the astringency for both of those was higher, was greater in her mouth. I concur. The astringency in this exists, but it is at a much lower level. And it does linger on my tongue, but it's not so standalone. It was all over my mouth, tongue, the top of my mouth. This is just a light patina on top of my tongue. Great catch.
Kay observes, I'm getting a soft astringency. The mouthfeel is smooth and firm. I don't know how I came up with firm, but I did.
Mouthfeel for K is smooth and firm with a soft astringency. So this is a great point, Kay, and I'm glad you made it because there are two things going here. No matter what, and no matter what anybody tells you when they serve you something, they call it tea. If you don't feel an astringency, be it light or heavy, it's not tea, period. And that is different from how the density feels in your mouth. And you made that distinction, Kate. Great catch. Yeah.
Rob observes the astringency of this tea lasts long after the taste. It's a sensation towards the back of my tongue.
Oh, that's interesting. So for Rob, it's different than for me. Not the long lastingness. The long lastingness is the same. I still have it on my tongue. It feels like it's going to sit on my tongue for the next 10 minutes, but it's at the forward part of my tongue. For Rob, it's at the back of his tongue. And again, there's nothing wrong with either of those observations. We're genetically different. Great catch. All right. Let's see how I'm doing. Oh, early for a change. This was a fun way to wrap up the yellow teas because this is ultimately very drinkable. You heard me say during the opening remarks that this is a tea grandma would be likely to enjoy. Absolutely. It's easy to drink. It just goes down really, really smoothly. The yellow teas in general, during these 3 weeks, I think one of the things you observe is unlike green tea, which has a much more pronounced, almost like a jumpy effect, the yellows are more mellow and are just ultimately more drinkable. In terms of polyphenols, the main difference is EGCG is higher in green tea. EGC is higher in yellow tea. Yes.
Cindy observes, I describe it as round, velvet, smooth, and full.
Round, velvet, smooth, and full comes from Cindy. Love that description. And part of the reason that it comes like that, and this actually links to something Rob said, is that astringency kind of sets a base. And as you drink it, the smoothness and fullness is on top of that base. And Kay, split them apart the same way. And I like this. And I like that Cindy has gotten that full appreciation of the depth of it.
Jennifer shares, I'm getting a mature, dried, ripe fruit flavor at the back of my tongue it's much lighter than the aroma of the wet tea, almost like a wisp or a ghost of the wet tea leaves aroma. It's lovely.
This is Jennifer?
This is Jennifer.
Okay. Great comment, Jennifer. There is a dried fruit at the back of the tongue for Jennifer. And yet it's
Lighter than the aroma of the wet tea.
okay. Lighter than the aroma of the wet leaves. And so I like this comparison because this tea goes down easily. You don't usually sit with a swig of it in your mouth all that long. And so the hints of that fruit, which were, yes, very distinct in the wet leaves, are less. And yet they're there. And if you take your time and do the 15 miles an hour in the 15-mile-an-hour zone, you catch that. Great catch.
Jen E observes, I keep calling this double honey to myself. The scent reminds me of the deep honey flavor that comes from that leftover bit that gets stuck in the jar. And the flavor is slightly lighter, but again, honey forward and some notes of dried fruit in the background. Kind of also reminds me of a bunch of Persian desserts, whose names are escaping me, but you get the point.
I do get the point. Persian desserts like baklava. Yes, that hint of honey, hint of a mild hint of fruit underneath. So this is a great comment, and it's great because it links both of those together. You can have those flavors both easily occur, and you do have those flavors both easily occurring in the mouth. And this comes because you took your time going through this. Great catch. All right. I loved going through yellow teas together with you. Today, we focused a little bit on the science. We looked at internal polyphenol oxidation, chemical oxidase, which is a chemical element which causes enzyme, which causes oxidation. We looked at outside of from fermentation point of view, from the Aspergillus niger microbe, the production of another element which continues to cause oxidation. We talked a little bit about history, looking at taking yellow as a color versus a modality and thinking about that as perhaps one of the reasons there's confusion about when yellow tea, the modality, actually started. We got a chance to taste this wonderful gift tea. We talked about gift teas. Jonathan asked a great question in China. Would you ever split a cake and give a part of a cake as a gift? And the answer is not normally, not a gift cake. It would be seen as you're diminishing the gift. So what do we have left to talk about next week? Well, I guess we're going to go to green teas next week. So we're about to start a session, Towering Pine, Dragonwell, and Satisfaction. Satisfaction is a green tea from Yunnan, Dragonwell from Zhejiang, and Towering Pine from, wait, is that right? No, it's from Fujian, Xiaobei. Towering Pine is Fujian? Hunan. Oh, okay, Hunan, sorry about that. So that'll be the next set, those three teas. Following that, we'll have 6 different red teas. We will get deep into red teas. We'll go into various parts of China. And then following that, we will have 6 cliff teas. So we have a great fall lineup for you, even leaning into the beginning of the winter. Your responsibilities, and by the way, I can't emphasize enough how astounded I am week by week by your commentaries. All of you really focus hard and take the time and give really thoughtful commentaries. This is helpful to me. It's helpful to all the group. Thank you for that. your responsibilities this week. Stay healthy, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye now.
Bye, folks.